and hey, I'm a storyteller, so talk to Tim, talk to me. Let's tell those stories. Let's get people excited about space.
Yeah, thank you, Meredith.
What a great segue. By the way, Tim, I'm going to have to use that in all of our job recruiting right now. Use that inspirational statement. It's like caveat emptor if you want to join a startup in space.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty cool. Thanks for being here today, David. It's really excited to bring you in here. And for those of you who are out on the live stream, which is most of you, and who may not know David Pearah is the CEO of Spider Oak Mission Systems, which is a leading space cybersecurity company that's focused on providing zero trust security solutions. I have a sense of what that is. I'm hoping Dave talks a little more about that. But Dave's an industry veteran with over 2 decades of engineering solutions across cybersecurity and the high performance computer industry. And he is leading his company's efforts to drive an entirely new industry standard for secure space communications. I don't want to take too much of his time with the bio, but Dave has been all over the cybersecurity industry with multiple successful startups, turnarounds, multiple master's degrees, and is, if you haven't gotten the sense already, incredibly intelligent, incredibly successful, and we're excited to have him here.
I hope I live up to that. I feel like the more time I spend in space, I feel like, wow, I really don't know a lot. But I want to make this conversational and a little less, me presenting as much as starting a conversation. And I love, Tim, your metaphor and idea of that, we can avoid the mistakes of the past as we chart these new frontiers. And I often think about beyond the first settlers and, some of the, interactions that they had with the folks who are already there. It's like, then how do you establish norms, culture, and safe practices out there? It's like, were the locomotives and the robber barons and the people running the trains and building all that infrastructure, were they in charge of it? Was the government in charge of it? And I do often think a lot about how we're going to be building space as the frontier, and not just who are the leading companies, but who's going to be setting up the practices, standards, norms, and expectations. You have to appreciate, for a long time, the adventure of going to space was about, I hope the rocket makes it. Like, I hope we get there. And not a lot of thought was like, okay, we're here. And then things like space debris is a problem. What a problem to have. Like, we didn't even think we could get something up there. And now we talk about our increasing reliance on the infrastructure of space, not just for people, but for our lives in terms of connecting data and visibility of what information can be collected. So there is a lot to work through. Space is not just another place. It has its own unique challenges. And a lot of what I think about, Tim, is how can we avoid some of the mistakes of the past? So that's going to really what I'll be focusing on here. So let me bring up my slides.
Okay.
So as everyone here, I'm sure if you're attending this conference, obviously space is open for business, and it's going to be a huge opportunity. I think a huge risk for a lot of people. There's nothing given and easy or simple about space, but it is a new frontier, one that has many of the same challenges of some of the old frontiers and new businesses of the past, but also that present some unique challenges that I'll be going over. Cybersecurity threats are real. We barely talk about them. And this is kind of the fray that we as a company, Spider Oak, have chosen to step into. And, it's gone from cybersecurity. We operate everything from the ground station to the people to the satellite itself. And within just a few years, we've gone to, well, maybe we don't need to operate our own ground station. Maybe we can just be one of 17 sensors on the satellite that's already going up, and literally treat it like a cargo van going up into space, and the ability for other nations to be putting satellites up. We're in a position now where we have to tackle these questions of cybersecurity. And I don't know if you all realize and follow the news, what we're doing on land isn't working. Not a week goes by without some announcement about some nation state or some private organization sponsored by a nation state or what have you breaching data. Because what we do is not enough. We have taken the traditional stance in the industry of software developers make applications, and it is someone else's responsibility in IT to protect them. And taking that attitude has led us to this unsustainable situation where we are constantly playing a game of catch up and waiting for the latest Microsoft vulnerability patch to hopefully protect us against the attacks of yesterday. Space is even harder because there is no opportunity to go up and say, well, let's just replace the satellite since it's been compromised. Well, not really. Or we need to protect the network that connects us to that satellite. What do you mean protect the network? We're talking about air and vacuum. There's nothing to protect. So there is a whole new set of challenges compounded with the ones that we already face on land. And they're vulnerable for a number of reasons, some of which I've already gone over, but think about the natural evolution of how space is going to develop. You have a whole new set of entrants. That slide from Morgan Stanley on all the new business opportunities is because people are beginning to specialize. Ground stations, data analytics, putting satellites in orbit, the sensors that go onto those satellites. With specialization comes the need for connectivity. Connectivity is a threat. It's necessary. We want to embrace connectivity, but connectivity produces a whole new set of risks to the system. For example, you don't have to hack a satellite. You just have to lie to it about where it is. There's nothing, why go through the trouble of trying to break into all the security layers of the satellite system if you could just lie to it about where it is, and then it will crash itself. Or in terms of payload control, you don't need to even necessarily let your enemies know that you can control the sensors. You can feed them wrong information. So now you don't even have to worry about traditional hacking. You can talking about, is the authenticity of the information coming off of the satellite trusted? These are questions that we have sidestepped for decades because we believed we could control every step of the supply chain of information in the air, in space, on land. These assumptions do not hold with this developing ecosystem of players. And we often like to say all the things that we do today, like let's just recover our network, let's rebuild the servers, let's redeploy endpoints to our users. Literally none of that will work in space because there is no geek squad in space. You have this acid flying around. So this is treated as something special, something expensive. And once it's compromised, you can't get it back in the traditional sense. So you need to make it not just hard, but mathematically impossible to compromise those assets. So that's kind of where we've come in. It's been a really interesting journey, honestly. As a company talking about the intersection of space and cybersecurity, there's a lot of interest and excitement about building space, much like in the Old West, building the locomotives and all that. But the idea of like setting up a town and providing safety for the people in and around the towns and developing infrastructure so that you have sustainable development. We are one of the few companies talking about that, and cybersecurity is just one lens of it. So getting everything into orbit and allowing people easy access to space is important, and it is the right thing that the investment community is focused on. We want to make sure that those assets are protected. And so we've developed a set of technologies that are uniquely suited to the challenges of space, which are what? Well, one I've already talked about. You physically can't get your hands on a lot of the things in space. So Anything that relies on, well, I'll just replace it if it goes bad, that doesn't work. The other things are, well, who controls what? How do you provide fine degrees of control around who can task the satellite versus who are the recipients of the data on the satellite? You don't need to be the same person. They don't even need to be the same organization. So think about some of the traditional challenges of space where we have a ground station. Ground stations talk to and control satellites, and they are a natural aggregation point for the data coming off of the satellite. And then that information is distributed from the ground station to the users. If you just stop and think about that, that's kind of insane. Why would a ground station need to see any of the data coming off of a satellite? Any more than your Outlook email admin, who performs an incredibly important job in making sure your email works in your company, but one of their job descriptions isn't seeing every email all the time. We have come to accept insane compromises when it comes to security. The reason why Edward Snowden can happen is because we conflate, confuse, and combine the ideas of security with access to data. That fundamental challenge cannot persist in space. We need to cleanly separate who has control over data and where it goes versus visibility to the data. This solves a huge stack of problems in this space economy and why we've chosen to utilize blockchain technology in the development of our product Orbit Secure. So we've developed a platform built on blockchain, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with in terms of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and cryptocurrencies, but there are other uses of blockchains and distributed ledgers, one of which is irrefutable, immutable access and control over data. We have taken those core concepts, taken out all the stuff that's related to currency, and really focused on the challenge of controlling data in space. And some of the advantages of that are poor connectivity in space. You cannot rely on a connection to a satellite. It's intermittent, and even when you have one, it could be a poor connection. So the idea of, well, let's just set up VPNs in space. Well, that's great, but for all of us who have experienced VPNs on land, when you have a bad connection, that doesn't work. So you need to have a security system that is resilient to and recognizes and embraces non-connectivity or poor connectivity and an increasing diversity of people operating and touching the data from source to sink. And that's exactly what we've chosen to focus on in terms of Orbit Secure. Some of the customers that we work with are the federal agencies directly that are focused on building satellite constellations and ground station networks. Others, and more frequently, are the people that serve that community or commercial clients. So ground station operators, satellite radio manufacturers, people who provide traditional Type 1 encryptors to the space ecosystem, people who are handling and operating satellite networks. We provide unique technology solutions to each of those folks. And, you know, in the spirit of candor, it's not easy to break into a market that's worked a certain way for a long time, but there's this increasing recognition of ground stations, for example. Why should they be able to see all the data coming off of a satellite? That doesn't make sense. Or why would we want to use Type 1 encryptors that, you know, we rotate the keys once, twice a month, maybe once every week? Well, why not change them every second? If you change your idea of locks to your house not being a metal key, but you change it to the idea of a code, and those codes can be freely given and taken away, you change the way you think about you let people in your house. That's what we do for space. We're introducing the idea of, you know, electronic keys and locks that are agile and fast and that really open up use cases. A good example, ground station operators that want to work with security and intelligence organizations want to traditionally need to show we're trustworthy. We have cleared people. We run great infosec and security for our company. You should trust our ground station. Our answer to that question is, why should you have to? Why should you have to trust your email admin provider to pinky promise not look at your code? Like, run a Zoom call right now. They can see this conversation. The reason why we're comfortable with it is because someone has pinky promised to not do anything bad with it. But there's no technical reason why they can't see this conversation. This is insane. So what you can now do is open up entirely new markets by saying you can trust us because you don't need to trust us. We don't have access to your data. We simply make your data go in your ground station. Same for mesh networks in space. We are now doing something very logical in space, which is connecting disparate satellite systems made by different manufacturers with different radio providers. And the way that security traditionally works in space is each hop in the link is secure. But that's about as smart as saying, oh, we have a Brinks truck and it brings cash to a bank. And then we put the money in the vault in the bank. But for about 2 to 3 minutes, we have literal stacks of cash in the middle of the streets. Guess where most robberies happen? No one wants to break into a vault and no one wants to break into a Brinks truck. People just want you to conveniently package the cash and leave it on the street, and that's when you go for it. That is what is happening in the satellite community, because we are disintegrating or disintermediating folks who are not operating the system end to end. We are leaving vulnerable a lot of information. And this, we need to really close up those gaps. So what we provide to radio manufacturers is the ability to close that gap. You can trust this satellite radio because you don't need to trust it. It cannot see what it is forwarding. It is simply moving packets of data along, and it can't actually unencrypt what it's sending along. So that's what we want to provide as tools to the entire community. This is a big ecosystem. We're not talking about when we talk about space cyber, we're really not limited to or really just thinking about satellites in space. So that's an important part of the ecosystem. But think about it. Sometimes this satellite is almost the least important part of the link. Let's say you have an IoT device on the ground and it uses a satellite of convenience to collect the information, and you now want to send that information to an agency for analysis. How much data should the satellite see? None. Satellite's not doing anything. So why should it have any casual access to the data? Why would the ground station need to see the data? Or let's say you have a commercial sat that transits to another one that talks to a third satellite. How much of the information does the middle satellite need to see? None. Today, they see everything. How about the different assets on a single satellite? We have one sensor from one customer versus another sensor from another, and they all travel through the same bus on the same satellite to the same ground station. How much of the information should the actual satellite bus see? Why should it see anything? We take for granted that everyone should see everything, and we use polygraphs and VPNs and firewalls to protect ourselves, which doesn't work on land and is absolutely not going to work in space. So let's not repeat the problems of the past. And I've already kind of go over this mesh networking example where you cannot rely on the fact that you operate all the things. You're going to be talking with untrusted systems. We're going to be transiting information over satellite networks from foreign nations. We're going to be doing the same things we do on the ground. So we have to do security in a completely different way. Just to kind of to wrap it up and then open up for questions, Forrester's done a report on one of the first reports that we've seen on focusing on cybersecurity. So you know that when you've gone from that plucky startup trying to have a conversation with a company who looks at you and shrugs like, what do you mean cybersecurity? We protect our data. And then you transition to, we need some cybersecurity help. And here's a report from Forrester. I guess it's one sign of the times that, the message is resonating. And we're certainly not the only people talking about space cyber, but I've seen a real shift over the last 6 months where the conversations have really moved from what the F are you talking about to like, oh yeah, this is important. We need to really start focusing on it. So this report is available, through our website. We're making the Forrester report available to the entire community. We ourselves are actually working on a space cybersecurity primer because a lot of people don't think about it. Space cyber is not so much a segment of the economy as it is some people's jobs at space companies. We need to do better than that. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. So let me open it up for questions.
Thanks, Dave. That was fascinating. It definitely is eye-opening to realize that we're more or less in an era where we still have telephone operators plugging in the wires between the calls, and they can listen into our party line. So yeah, did not think about that, and it is really cool over the last 5 to 6 years, this emergence of zero trust across different industries. That is something that has a lot of potential, especially in space with time lag delays and everything else. Do you all have any sense of other applications for that going forward that you all would work on?
Yeah, it's interesting. We have focused. First of all, no one company has the corner on the market of cybersecurity, right, Tim? It's a big.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity is more of a cultural discussion than it is a single one technology to rule them all. We have chosen to focus on moving and storing data in space as our pointy end of the stick for our company. But there are many other zero trust technologies, and other folks like Tricep, for example, are making satellite appropriate, robust, and secure operating systems. That's important.
Yeah.
Right? That's a big part of, like, can you trust the operating system? Because at the end of the day, I, through SpiderUp, can try to protect data at motion or at rest, but if it ends up in an insecure place, you know,
Yeah.
then you still have a problem. I will say this, Tim, the zero trust network access companies, and that's where most of the zero trust conversation happens. So I do find myself outside the zero trust. As much as zero trust has helped our company and our conversations, a lot of it has to do with, we're going to do away with VPN, and we're going to move to, zero trust network access, and really have the boundary around the application. This is good. I'm not against it. The problem is it doesn't really work that well in space, because most zero trust network access is built on the, I can connect the network from all the things to all the other things all the time reliably. But what if you can't? Like, think about Microsoft Outlook, the desktop application.
Yeah.
It still works when you're on a plane, even if you didn't buy the satellite, package. It still doesn't, like, shut you off. But if you assumed everything is a web application, and you had to use even existing satellite networks, it would be tough, right? So we are contacted a lot of times because people have ConOps use cases and challenges in places where they cannot get reliable connectivity, and yet they want to enforce security. That seems to be the pointy end of the stick for us in terms of a lot of our discussions, as opposed to inside of our company in this satellite operations center, we have great internet. It's like, okay, well, then maybe you don't think you have a problem. So that's kind of what I see as playing out.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. When so a lot of our viewers in this section of our conversations event are policymakers, or congressional members and staff. You mentioned early on how there's a lack of standards, a lack of really anything in this space that in part gives you an opening. But what are some of those standards that would be useful to have, even if it's just signaling from the US government?
Yeah, I love this question. Do you know, ultimately, we are serving the needs and the missions of the US government, right? So when people say, I want to do X, I want a sensor that sees this, ... and do something to make it secure, please. You're sending a very clear message to your suppliers and the integrators and the primes. Don't care about security. Just go to sam.gov, and look at all the solicitations coming out of the Space Development Agency or Air Force what have you. Cybersecurity probably gets a paragraph, and it's about as sophisticated as make sure it's protected too, please. So that's what you're going to get. So that when I go talk to the primes or the integrators, they're like, our customers don't care. This is the exact conversation I'll have is like, they are happy with the admittedly lackluster security we provide them. When they start caring, we'll start talking to you. So it's not even one particular set of technology. I would advocate end-to-end security. That's not unique to Spider Oak, right? We're a blockchain end-to-end zero trust company, but put aside us, put aside blockchain, insist on zero trust end-to-end security as a table stakes requirement of all the space assets and infrastructure you put up, you will start to see a higher quality of solution. Because right now, what you're getting when you fail to articulate something better than some type of security, you're getting type 1 encryptors, which are like, you should have a lock on your house. Yeah? Is that it? You know, is that the only conversation we're going to have around security? You deserve better. And if you raise the bar on what you're asking for in terms of end-to-end security and true zero trust, you're going to start to see better solutions. And unfortunately, I wish I could say over the last year that, you know, all the proposals I've seen and when I'm trying to partner with primes and integrators, the bar has been raised, but not by much. And you need to ask for more. And that will trickle down to small businesses and that will trickle down to people delivering. But if you ask for little, you'll get little.
No, that's a good point. And it's definitely something that, you know, that's an easy fix. That's a contracting officer writing that into the solicitation rather than an act of Congress that's required. So that's a really good point, and something that I assume not a lot of people think about, the power of that subtle tweak in a proposal changing quite a bit. Yeah, that's interesting. I wanted to make sure we open it up to questions from the audience. If you have a question, you can type it in the chat. You can put it in the messaging for the live stream of your choice to make sure we get the questions to Dave here. Before, to give everybody time, one of the things you mentioned was this primer. You know, I assume my computer is not secure, and everybody else should. But with this space cybersecurity primer, what's the most surprising thing you found as you built it?
Yeah, first of all, I learned a lot as we're putting it together, right? So to see that we walked into it with, there is a surprising amount of trust in people. We build a satellite network the way that we put, in terms of like, we trust this company. They've been good for us in the past. They're US based. They have cleared people. We will build a secure network. We'll have a firewall, and we're going to we have secure links, and we're going to have a shared secret over, these encryptors. What's kind of struck me is that we put a lot of faith in people. And I go back to the example of your email admin. This is just a simple example. All of us use email, I assume, and we all rely on our admins being nice people.
Ours isn't. That's me.
Right. But it's kind of crazy. And I assumed, and you asked me what was surprising, I assumed it wasn't that way. I assumed that, clearly with the intelligence and defense community, we probably have better systems where people don't have casual access to the keys for moving data from point to point. No, we don't. People people are, we're on the pinky promise system, right now for satellite communications. But they seem happy with it. That's the other surprise. It's like when I'll bring it up, it's, oh, so who has access to the keys for encrypting the link from the ground station to the satellite? Well, these 20 people. Oh, that's a problem? No, it's like, no, they're trustworthy. We hire good people. It's like, what does this have to do with people and trusting people?
Yeah.
Like, for example, we make a product not for space, or it's not anti-space, but we make a team collaboration product for special operators called Crossclave. Think of it
Yeah.
as like an alternative to like Dropbox,
Yeah.
or Teams. And the reason why they use it is because they don't have to trust the admin. They don't have to trust us. People trust SpiderUp because they don't have to trust us. And my favorite quote from one of our customers is like, the reason why we don't use Teams and we use SpiderUp Crossclave is because I don't want to die. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, right now when I use Teams, they have a fancy data center with fancy admins. They can still see every friggin' piece of data I have. I am not comfortable putting my life on the line for that. And what surprised me is like even pointing that out sometimes to people in the space comms community, there's like shoulder shrug. It's like, well, we haven't been bitten on the ass yet, so what's the problem?
Yeah.
So it's that kind of lackadaisical attitude. It's like, it's okay not to be a SpiderUp customer, but this kind of laissez-faire of like, I guess we'll just roll the die and just hope that people act in a responsible manner and humans are trustworthy. That's what stitches our whole space ecosystem together, and it's crazy.
Yeah. I think so. Kevin Russell asked the question in the chat here. I'm not gonna try to understand this question. I'm hoping you can explain it, but he asks, counting the data by in a reliable, robust way, how is that validated or ensured?
Yeah, so in our particular system, we encrypt data. So we don't have any fancy encryption actually in the SpiderUp solution. We apply encryption in a unique way, which is, how do you coordinate keys amongst people with the need to know without involving the server? That's fundamentally what SpiderOak does as a company. We came up with not a trick, but we utilize blockchain to solve a very particular problem, which is, how do you calculate keys without involving admins, servers, infrastructure, which is hard, because think about how key management happens right now. We have Active Directory, or we have a certificate server that has all the keys to everything. Let's protect it. Our attitude is like, the problem is that you have a certificate authority. You have a central place where all your secrets are kept. That's the problem. Don't protect it. Don't have one. So what we've done through a blockchain is come up with a novel way of calculating keys amongst only the people with the need to know. The encryption itself is pretty pedestrian. It's pretty much the standard symmetric and asymmetric, key cryptography that we use and love today. It's just that the keys are held only amongst the things that have a need to know. And by utilizing a blockchain, you can actually do this in a really fast way. Going back to my example of, if you move from like a metal key, like if you only have metal keys for your house, you have to ask questions like, should I let my housekeeper have one or my dog walker have one? And now, if you have an electronic lock, you can do something like, I'll give them a different key that only works during this time. And when I stop trusting them, I don't change the keys to the locks to the house. I revoke the key, right? If you have that capability, then you have the ability to change the way you think about your satellite network. So let me answer the question. So the way that we ensure data integrity and data privacy is through the same way that blockchain does traditionally, which is the keys ensure through an immutable ledger that the data that you put in is what you get out. So that's the integrity piece. But the only people that have the keys to view the data are the people with the need to know. So literally, if you compromise a SpiderOak server, you've got nothing. My admin, who runs our SpiderOak Crossclave system, where we run our whole entire company, I don't need to trust whether she's trustworthy. She is, but I don't need to trust that she is because she can't see any content that we haven't explicitly made available to her, even though she runs the server, administers all the users' accounts, and puts it all together. So think about like Signal on your phone for like messaging, but think about that at the scale of satellites and not just messaging.
Yeah.
You know, Signal, the company or the organization can't see your messages. Now scale that up. That's kind of what we've done.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Yeah, no, exciting. And thanks for being here today, Dave. It was great having you here. People can find you at your website, spideroak.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have spideroak.com. We also have a part of the company called Spider Oak Mission Systems. I know, creatively named. That focuses on, you know, DoD IC work. So Noah, Matt, and I are really the nexus for a lot of our federal intelligence and defense discussions. I mean, we have a whole commercial side of the business that's not just space focused, but is primarily space. Space has become like the fastest growing part of our business, to my surprise and delight. And this is how you can get a hold of us. So spideroak.com or spideroak-ms.com. Here's our contact info. We would love to hear from you. We are learning every day just as much as I hope I've imparted some information. We don't know everything. And we're learning every day too. So it's been a really fantastic journey.
Cool. Thanks. Well, great having you here, Dave, and look forward to seeing the success you all have in the future.
Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.